Hello, everybody. This is September 26th, 2023, and this is the OLM Dev Working Group meeting. We have a pretty light agenda today, but I'll kick it off with a quick reminder that we have one brief and one RFC. The lazy consensus state for one of the RFCs is actually today, so make sure to view this and get any last minute comments in. And we also have a graph depreciation and delegation brief that's going to reach lazy consensus on October 6th. So please make sure to review these and leave comments. First thing on the agenda was submitted by Bryce. Bryce.
Yep, so I've got a demo for the catalog D HTTP server stuff that was recently, operator controller was recently updated to use for getting catalog data for resolution. I'm working on standing up a kind cluster right now, but I'll go ahead and share. And can folks see the terminal okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So right now the kind cluster is standing up and installing operator controller and all of its dependencies. So you can see all the different stuff is installed, so catalog D, operator controller, ruckpack, and the version of catalog D on main is v070, where the catalog metadata, bundle, and packages APIs are all gone. Just to show. There's no resource type called catalog metadata. No bundle metadata. And no packages. And what we can do is we can go ahead and apply this catalog. So we can see that this operator hub IO catalog has been added. And we can wait for it to be unpacked. So I will put a watch on this. And once it's unpacked, we can create the operator. Let's see. Yep, Alex.
Is that failure message pretty common when unpacking, or does it imply something else is happening?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that for what it's worth, I've never seen this error message happen for operator hub IO catalog, at least not until now.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've seen it a couple times when messing around with stuff, but I don't think it's super common. What I've done in the past is I've deleted the catalog and reinstalled it, and that tends to work.
Do we have an issue for that? Because that seems like something that should be fixed.
Yeah, I can. We don't have one, but I can create one after this.
All right, thanks. I have a feeling that we need to bump our operator registry dependency, and that would probably solve it.
Okay, cool. So now it has successfully unpacked the catalog image, and we can install this operator, which should create the Argo CD operator. So just to as you see, the package name for this is Argo CD operator. We see that it was installed. We do git s, we see Argo CD operator system. So Argo CD has been installed. And we can also, just to show the catalog D HTTP server, we can port forward it and do some curl requests to see packages and stuff like that. So this request on the operator hub IO is going to show all the OLM.package schemas. So this is basically all the packages that are available in the catalog. And then we can do, say, if we want to do channels for a particular package, we can do OLM.channel, and we can select where .name is, we'll do the zookeeper operator.
You might need to make that dot package rather than dot name, because the name is the name of the channel.
Oh, yeah, nope, you're right.
That seems like an awful lot of time.
Yeah, it's gonna time out. Sometimes I have to recreate the port forward if I've canceled an in progress request. And also looks like I spelled this wrong. But so now we can see all the channel information for the zookeeper operator. And so the same thing can go for bundles as well. We can see all the bundles. So and just to keep the output smaller, dot name. And so we can see all these are all the bundles available for the zookeeper operator. But yep, Joe.
Well, I was gonna wait until you're finished.
Yeah, well, that I was going to end here unless there's anything in particular people want me to query or do.
Okay, yeah, the thing I was gonna say is, if you're familiar with OLMB 0, the difference here is that you basically get access to all of the data that's in the catalog. Like it's literally just all of the FBC. Whereas with OLMB 0, you don't get that. There's sort of two things you get. One is the package manifest API, which doesn't show anything other than really channel head information. And then you also get the gRPC API, which does show you more, but it's in the gRPC API interface, which is difficult to use and not really something that we ask people to use. And then Bryce didn't say this, but like there's still more work to do to figure out how do we expose this data to users in a way that is on par with sort of the package manifest style APIs, right? Like we shouldn't expect people to do port forwards and curls and JQs. So we've got follow-up work, not quite spec'd out yet, but we know that there needs to be more work done to make this user experience nicer.
Yep, and to speak a little bit on that, this past Friday I was toying around with some stuff with that, just to get a better idea of like what might be necessary to think about when doing that. But so that's definitely, like you said, Joe, future work that's going to be planned out.
one nice thing that Jordan mentioned in the chat is that this is just sort of all standard protocols and formats. So yeah, like we'll probably have a binary that does the nice thing that most people want, but at the end of the day, like if that doesn't solve the need that you have, then you can always resort to, okay, let me just go talk HTTP and download JSON and view it, look at it, whatever. So it should open up more use cases for more complex or advanced users.
Yep. And I saw Anik had his hand up next, I think.
Yeah. So I think it's sort of one thing important to call out that is relevant. Just if you go a little deeper, the thing that's actually happening is when you say install an operator for me, operator controller is basically is going to iterate through all the catalogs that are there, and then each catalog has, if you see the CR, there's an endpoint that says that here's the endpoint that you can query, where you can get the entire FPC that Joe mentioned. So for each of those catalogs, give me the entire FPC. So it gets all of the FPC for all of the catalogs. And then that's your sort of like variable source or entity source. Right now, there is no sort of way of saying, give me something more filtered, but operator controller is not asking for that. So if use cases arise for a more filtered sort of like response, then we can talk about that. I think there's a little bit of talk about helping clients cache some of these responses so that every time an operator is installed, the clients or operator controller doesn't have to like hit all of these endpoints. But yeah, this is all future work optimizations that's to do. I think I've captured all of that stuff that I wanted to say.
Mithila?
Just a quick question. I think I know the answer, but do I understand correctly that this is like atomic? So previously, I think we could have ended up in the situation where we list objects which are like still, when you update the catalog, you could have potentially the situation where you get some of the objects which are from the old catalog version and from the one which is we are in progress of unpacking, so like in between state. And now I think it is atomic. At least this is the idea I got from the PR. Is this assumption correct, or am I missing something?
Nope, you're correct. It does allow it to be atomic, because what we're doing is we're serving this all.json file, and so whenever a catalog is unpacked, kind of behind the scenes, what happens is it unpacks it to a temporary all.json file, and then it renames it. So it's pretty much a file server just serving these files in this directory, and so once that file is changed, it serves it up, and so it's atomic operations, because it'll contain all the catalog contents for the unpack catalog.
Great, thanks.
There's no other questions. I can stop sharing my screen and we can move on to the next person.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's an awesome update. Next up, we have a demo / update on the entity source removal provided by Nikolai.
Yeah, 1 sec. I will start sharing my screen, and you should see it now. Let me know if you do not see it. So 1 second, I need to move a few things around. Right, do you see my screen with the GitHub pull request?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. So some time ago, we updated DEPI to remove the concept of entity sources. So a little bit of background. So DEPI was initially designed as a like a wrapper around the SAT solver, and there was some API surface which was designed to be sort of generic client to the domain specific things. In our case of operator framework, it would be like bundles, right? Or some other information. So there was a abstraction for querying the data from API server and filtering it and using predicates, etc. At some point, we realized that it's probably a good idea to get rid of this API surface from DEPI, and we did that. But this change in DEPI, once we merged the DEPI in this pull request, which is currently in the screen, we realized that we need to update operator controller. So I and Daniel, we were working on doing so in the operator controller. This work is now done. It's merged to master, sorry, main. And so the demo is basically no demo. So it is mainly refactoring, quite a large one, where we updated the DEPI and had to move some of the abstractions from DEPI and filtering tools specifically into operator controller. So today we get this big JSON from catalog.d, and we want to filter data from it. So we do this on operator controller side at this moment. So this work is done. It's large PR, and ideally you should not notice it. So I believe we haven't changed any end-to-end tests, so this PR does not contain changes to end-to-end tests, and they all pass. But basically the idea is that everything should work the same way it worked before. But while working on this thing, we uncovered few things which can potentially be improved in the operator controller. So previously with entity sources and entities, we were creating one entity and one variable per bundle, which is, I think, not necessary. So we created a follow-up issue to look into reducing the number of variables to one per bundle, because we while building the problem for the solver, we do all the necessary filtering before it even reaches DEPI. So I think we can get rid of the, currently we have one variable for each occurrence of a bundle in a channel. So like if you have foo v1 appear in a stable and beta bundle, we would create two variables. The solution to the problem would still be the same, but it hopefully will give us a little bit of performance boost, and as well as maybe hopefully more readable and debuggable problems. But again, it's something still we need to still do. And another thing which we need to look into is this. So currently, operator controller makes multiple calls to the interface which fetches all the bundles, and we need to look into loading the bundles once per resolution instead of doing it multiple times. It was we had this behavior before the refactoring, and it's something which came up while we were working on entity source removal, as well as the introduction of HTTP server. So this one is probably not a big effort, but I think it will give us noticeable performance boost, because even with the caching on the file system, which was introduced while in this pull request, we still unmarshalling a lot of data multiple times per one resolution. So that's not great. So still some follow-ups to do, but we no longer have entity sources, and this unblocks some other work which, for example, we can now start looking into introduction of upgrade edges based on firmware, because we have all the APIs in place for filtering the data, and I think some other pieces depend on entity source removal as well now are unblocked. So that's mainly it for me. I think this is everything I wanted to mention. Any questions about this?
Sorry, I think I got 90% towards the end of everything that you said. I think I missed the first 5%. So I think this is just for me to be on the same page. You said that entity source is being removed, and then I saw something about a catalog metadata in that PR comment. Could you just very shortly say that what are we doing with catalog metadata instead of entity sources?
So previously we were using entity sources as a way to fetch the data from catalog. Now we got rid of it, and we have like a client which we use inside of the variable sources to do that. Is this what you were missing, or?
Yeah. Okay. So it calls the HTTP server. It reaches out to the HTTP servers, but then there is a client that creates these entity sources instead of the solver doing it. That's the thing that you guys.
Yeah. So there is like no concept of entity now. We got rid of entity sources and entities completely. But we do build some objects which we keep in memory during the resolution. The objects are basically wrappers around declarative config. So we take the JSON from the catalog, we parse it, we filter it, and we select objects we need for our resolution. That's like high level description of what's going on.
And then that object is called catalog metadata, whatever the client creates.
No. It's catalog metadata. It was so a little bit more background. So we were working on client to HTTP server and removal of entity source in parallel. But before that, we switched from bundle metadata cube API objects to catalog metadata objects, which were similar format to what HTTP server serves now. So it was like an intermediate step between the current state in main and where we use HTTP server, and old state where we were using API, Cube API to fetch the catalog data. So today we do not interact with catalog metadata at all. This PR 411 operator controller gets rid of any dependencies on catalog metadata, but we do get catalog metadata with using the HTTP server. It's not the catalog metadata cube object. It's catalog metadata from the HTTP server from catalog D. I hope I made it like I explained it well. I don't know. It's like too many mentions of catalog metadata. I see how the confusion, how this can be confusing.
No, that clears it out. Thanks for having the patient, Mikhail.
No worries. I think it's my fault not to make it not that ambiguous. Anyone? Any other questions? That will be me then. Next topic.
All right, no questions, but really appreciate you guys doing this lift. I know it wasn't easy. I did see something pop up in the chat just a second ago. Frederick, is that related to the catalog? Or would you like to speak to that question?
Yeah, it is related to catalog. So just to follow up on what was just mentioned, and the fact that so the API is not a Kubernetes API for querying the catalog. And yeah, my question was whether there is a plan to have that in the future.
So there's definitely been some discussion on that point, Frederick. The main thing that was a problem with the original set of APIs is that they were CRD based, and so we had to issue like thousands of create and update calls when things changed, and then you would get inconsistent state where you would have periods where there was some old catalog data and new catalog data that existed simultaneously as the sync process was happening. We also talked about doing an aggregated API server, which is what OLM v0 has. I don't think that's totally off the table yet, but we definitely wanted to get rid of the CRD based APIs. So we have to go back and figure out, is HTTP sufficient for all the use cases that we know that the Kubernetes API like help solve? Like, is there an alternative? So I don't think we've totally closed that door, but it's kind of where we are now, at least.
Okay, and Joe, it seems like the next two items on the agenda were submitted by you, so I'll let you take it away.
Yep. So I've got two PRs. I was mainly just wanting to announce these and get some feedback on them. The first one is related to removing a feature entirely. So I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to surprise anybody or break anybody. So the first feature, the feature that I'm proposing that we remove is in FBC, there is an olm.bundle.object property, which we use right now, really because OLM v0's package server and gRPC API requires that we send the objects over to the clients when they request certain gRPC APIs. So the workaround when we originally developed FBC was, okay, to simplify that, we will have this alpha level property olm.bundle.object that lets us just encode the entire object and send it over. And one of the ways that you could do it, there's two ways basically. There's you could just inline all of the data as base64 encoded string, or you could have a reference which would reference a file that would be inside the FBC somewhere, and then the server, like all the FBC machinery, essentially knew how to dereference and send the data for the file in place of the inline file. It turns out that we made a whole bunch of assumptions based on the fact that, like, well, there could be file references in the FBC, and if there are file references, then it makes it really hard for us to essentially treat FBC as just a schema. And because now there are references to files that are relative to locations, like you can't change the hierarchy of anything, and things essentially get much more cumbersome. So we've never had any code that like generated FBC that used these ref style olm.bundle.objects. So that's point one. And then point two is we probably 3 or 4 months ago essentially like deprecated those objects entirely and finally have like a better replacement for them, which is the olm.csv.metadata. So anybody that's using versions of OPM as of 128 won't even see olm.bundle.object or won't need to use them. So the whole ref thing sort of becomes moot because you can just inline the string that's expected in the olm.csv.metadata fields. So I guess TLDR on this first point is please take a look at the PR, especially if you're a FBC generator or someone that's building FBCs, and double check all of your catalogs and make sure that you don't have any of these OLM.bundle.object reference style properties. If you do, then let us know, and then we can talk and figure out if there's we need to take our time with this. I guess that's the main thing there. Before I move on, are there any questions? Anybody immediately know of any concerns with that that we want to talk about here right now? I don't see anybody from IBM on the call. I know that they also build catalogs, and I ping them in our upstream Slack channel. So, and I think I saw Chris was on the issue, so I expect to get some feedback from them somewhat soon.
Yeah, I'm guessing there'll be a wider notification than this call and the Slack pings, right?
Yeah, and I can send something out on the mailing list too. And Vu, I see you have your hand up.
I'm sorry, I just need a quick memory refreshing on the references, and you bring up package server. This is this for the console when we bring up these references?
Technically, it's for anyone who consumes the package manifest API, which one of the clients for that
Is it a console?
console.
Yeah. Okay, right. Okay. I just want to remember what's the use case for this. I just want to check that real quick. That's all.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So
Another
I was
use
correct.
case, another use case is the kubectl operator plugin, which is essentially a CLI version of the console. And then just users on the cluster who want to have some discoverability about the catalog, who can do kubectl get package manifests. So all of that's you have to have the CSV in.
Yeah, you need to having the manifest with it. Okay.
Right.
Okay, correct. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll move on. So the second topic essentially builds on the first topic. So the second topic is, can we implement migration for FBCs? And this gets into the same subject of the OLM.bundle.object and OLM.csv.metadata. So back in May or June, we merged a PR that did a whole bunch of performance improvements, both in terms of parallelizing how we load FBC, but also in terms of we discovered that the OLM.bundle.objects were massive problems from a performance standpoint. So that's sort of the impetus that made us devise this new OLM.csv.metadata property, which is the replacement, which is basically the minimum amount of stuff that we need to encode into the catalog to still serve the full amount of what package server ends up using to generate package manifest API. So we did that back in June. So when you generate or when you migrate an SQLite database, or when you generate FBC from a bundle, so if you use OPM render a bundle image, both of those cases currently today already produce FBC that uses OLM.csv.metadata. And the second point is essentially cool, that's great and all for people that haven't migrated yet, or that are using, that are generating and adding new bundles to their catalog. But what about everyone that's already got an FBC? We didn't have anything that would help them essentially apply migrations to existing FBC to get better FBC. So this PR is essentially twofold. One is to change the OPM migrate command to allow FBC to be used as the argument. Before, it was essentially something that we said was going to be only supported for SQLite to FBC migrations. But now it seems like we could use it for FBC, old FBC to new FBC migrations. So that's one. And then there's also OPM render, which the PR adds a -- migrate flag, which is a Boolean. So if it's turned on to true, then we'll migrate FBC from old to new. It's a no op for SQLite and bundles because we already generate stuff as the newest, latest, and greatest FBC. So essentially, the point here is we want to make it so that if you've already generated FBC, you can apply these. You can use OPM to make your FBC smaller and leaner and better. So Jordan put me on the spot earlier in chat and said that I would have a demo, which I didn't have, but luckily it's fairly easy, so I can demo this. And Vu, do you still have a question? Is this a new hand or is that your old hand?
This new hand.
All
I
right, go
wish
for
I
it.
can having more than one hand, but that's sorry. Zoom is not allowing me to do so. Just a quick question. I'm noticed is the apparent of the migrate and the render command become overlapping quite a bit. Do you think it's gonna become a little bit of not sure what to use in the future, and you intended to keep them separated or combine them or anything like that? Just a thought.
Yeah, the difference is essentially that render outputs to standard out as a stream. And that was already a problem for the previous thing I mentioned about references, file references. When you render something that has a hierarchy that uses file references, those references are useless. So that was already a problem. But anyway, the point of render is that you can use it in a pipeline and do things like JQ and stuff with it. Migrate is a little bit different. It ends up calling render under the hood, but what it does is it outputs to a new directory location, and it uses a package hierarchy. So like when you render or when you migrate a catalog to a new catalog using the migrate subcommand, you get like a new directory where that directory contains subdirectories for each package that lists that's in the catalog. I think I don't think we've gotten any feedback that one or the other is better or worse. I think they just serve slightly different use cases. And it's really just a slight wrapper over render. So it hasn't been a problem to maintain. Whenever we make fixes, it's almost always to how render works, and then migrate just inherits it for free. So I think to answer your question, like, yes, they have a lot of overlap, but no, like it doesn't seem like it's a problem.
Okay, thank you. A quick follow-up for that. So what is your intended, or let's advertise, no, I wouldn't use the word advertising, recommended flow here in the sense of how to using them both in combination? Are you going to guarantee that when you do render, the output will basically having the latest schematic of FPC, or you recommend them to run the migrate afterward to get the latest? Because assuming when you publishing the binary, they do have a version skew and all of that come into picture. Or I'm mistaken here.
So it sounds like there are two questions there. So first question, in terms of like, what are the expectations from rendering? I'm proposing that we introduce this as a flag so that if you have an old FBC and you want to render it, you can render it and not have any migrations applied to it. So basically like, don't change it in case you're using older tooling that requires something from the older stuff. So that's the point of the flag, rather than just doing it always. And then to answer your second question about version skew, essentially this is a backwards compatible change in that like we don't break anything and all of the old catalogs still continue to work. So if you've got OLM and this is going back to code that we already merged months ago, but if you've got old FBC catalogs, those still work with the latest versions of OPM. If you use the new OLM.csv.metadata properties, then you have to have a version of OPM recent enough that knows about it, which is 128.0. So you can't migrate to use OLM.csv.metadata properties, but then serve it with an older version. So it's backwards compatible, but not forwards compatible.
All right. Thank you.
Essentially, like the code that merged that generates OLM.csv.metadata is the same version of the code that knows how to serve it, right? So as long as you're using the same version, then you're good. It's only a problem if you're using two different versions of OPM to generate and to serve. And
yeah, that is my main. That is my main reason behind that second question, because that's the tendency of people using OPM, that they just not aware of OPM version that attaching to certain feature or certain new thing that you're doing with the newer version of OPM. They keep using the old one, and until realizing that something doesn't quite work out, or their coworker having a newer version of OPM, they run something else, and the combination of that create a problem, which is tend to be a rather common
Yeah.
reoccurring issue with OPM versioning, right?
So Steve is actually working on something related to that, which is essentially to make it so that OLM controls the OPM version on cluster and uses the latest one available for that, for whatever that OLM version uses, right? So I think that problem will be mitigated with some of Steve's upcoming changes, but that takes us a little bit off topic.
Sure.
Okay, I've got a demo now that Jordan asked for one. So let me do that real quick.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate
Yeah, no
it.
problem. Dude. Let's see. Let me make sure I've got the right window here. There we go. All right, you guys see that?
Yes.
All right. So I pulled down the Operator Hub catalog locally, and I've got this catalog directory that's 193 megabytes. This is the old FBC, so this has not been migrated yet. So if you look at this, just to stick on the Zookeeper theme that Bryce started, if you scroll down up, like here's your olm.cs or olm.bundle.object, right? There's several of these. And they just get like just looking at this is terrible, right? Like you gotta keep scrolling, it's just like gibberish essentially. So that's what things look like now, and they're huge. And there's one of these for every object in the bundle rather than just for the CSV. So it's just wasted. Like none of those matter. So if we do OPM migrate catalog to catalog migrated, this will apply those migrations. And if we then look at catalog migrated, the exact same stuff that we send in the gRPC API is still here, right? So like we have lost 0 fidelity from what is served from the gRPC API. So we're down what? 80 something percent almost. So it's a massive improvement. Parsing is a lot faster. The amount like downloading and shipping the stuff around is a lot faster. If we look at what it looks like in there now, did I look at the wrong one? Yes. Then eventually we will find a bundle that has CSV metadata. So this is just the fields in the CSV that the gRPC API, that the catalog server, package manifest, what's it called? Package server needs for OLMv0. So we have all of the annotations from the CSV, we have the API service definitions, the CRD descriptions, the description of the operator, the display name, install modes, keywords. So that question you asked Vu in the chat about, like, it'd be cool if I could search for keywords, like, well, now you can, it's in the catalog under this property. All the stuff that we end up showing for channel heads in the package manifest API is now here. And this is much smaller than what we used to send around. So yeah, that all, like that demo is basically like, that's been present since back in June. The new stuff here is that I can, like this command is something I can do now. Whereas before it would say like, sorry, we can't migrate FBC catalogs. You can do this too. So this should show us how many olm.bundle.objects we have. And if I change this to, then this should be 0. And then if I look at csv.metadata, $880. So the reason there's a difference here is because there's, like I said, there's one object, there's one olm.bundle.object property in the catalog for every object in the bundle. So that includes CRDs, services, are back that's not part of the CSV. All that other stuff that can show up in a bundle had olm.bundle.objects. None of that was ever read or used by anything in OLM, so it was just wasted. This is the number of CSVs that were in the catalog before. So there's one olm.csv metadata for each CSV, which is probably one per bundle. Would be interesting to see. Actually, it's one per channel head potentially. Another little caveat here is not every bundle that's migrated originally from an SQLite database has bundle objects. The way that OPM works is that it'll prune out objects in most cases for non-channel head bundles. So in this case, like you probably will not see olm.csv.metadata for every single bundle. It's just going to be for the bundles that are the heads of their channels. Okay, any more questions? If not, that is the end of my demo.
Ready. With that done, I'm going to go over each of the milestones for a quick check-in, and then we'll be able to conclude.
We have Vu's hand up again.
Oh, Vu?
I can ask more questions if you want me to. That's not a problem here. No, I just having because this. I'm not sure I want to ask it because I think it's a bit of out of the topic here. But do we ever consider to get rid of CSV altogether?
OLMv0 or OLMv1 is going to introduce new bundle formats where you don't have to have a CSV.
Okay, so this CSV.metadata is just particularly for that type of bundle that need to have CSV. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
It's unclear. Like we haven't done a whole lot of work in the catalog area for other bundle types yet. So it's TBD, whether there's some other new metadata that applies equally to everything or whether there's per bundle metadata. Like a lot of that is still TBD. But yes, this would only apply to registry v1 bundles.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, well, let's go through each of the milestones then. So this one, we're 60% complete for catalog v0.8.0. Would anybody that contributes to this project like to speak to it?
Yeah, just a quick note that the v0.8.0 that you're seeing is an early release opening. So we were supposed to, last week we released v0.0.6, and then in 3 weeks from the last 0.6.0 release, we were supposed to release v0.7.0. But the catalog D team, and this is like a shout out to, did a spectacular work getting all of that work done. So we were able to release v0.7.0, I think more than a week early. And therefore we started a v0.8.0 release, which is why you see it's not that populated yet. I think next time we come around, it should get more populated.
Okay, cool. In regards to operator controller, most of the work here, Joe, I did go over this by the way after last week, and I confirmed that this is the ongoing work for operator controller. Most of this has not, it all is assigned to Mikla and potentially Daniel next sprint, and I believe that it's not been started because of the work they had to do to remove the entity sources. Is that correct, Mikla?
Yep.
Okay, so it's likely that we should update. We'll see if anything has actually landed in operator controller before the next working group meeting and update this list accordingly, because a lot of this could go into 7.0, but if nothing's merged in 0.6, we can probably just cut it, or so we can just delay it. So next up, actually, I guess we're actually, I suppose we know that the entity source removal PR landed, so we could cut that as v0.6.0. Cool. So next up, we've got RecPack. And there are 4 items all related to bundle deployment health. There's an open PR. Last I heard is that it's just waiting a final review from Joe. So Joe, if you could get eyes on that, that'd be super. Otherwise, this one should probably land this week. So we'll cut the release. Cool. And then Deppy is out of date, but Bear has volunteered to fix this over the course of the next week. So we should be able to start looking at this milestone going forward in community meetings. So in terms of action items for next working group meeting, would anybody like to lead the meeting? Any volunteers?
I can run next week's meeting. This is Daniel.
Hey, Daniel. And then after that, we do have a couple of the due dates coming up for the releases. Would anybody like to volunteer to cut the release for operator controller and catalog D, I suppose?
FYI, yeah, I think just a quick callback to what I mentioned earlier. I don't think we'll need a catalog D release at the same time as operator controller release, but the other thing that I wanted to mention is we also have it in our to-do list to document the catalog D release process. So it should be pretty straightforward if anybody wants to volunteer it once that documentation is out.
Cool. So I'm going to leave it to Onyx, since you seem to be with the most up to date on this. I'm going to say Onyx, decide if someone needs to cut a catalog D release. Does that seem reasonable, Onyx?
Yep, sounds like a reason. Sounds like a payback for me putting in the spot last time. I'm kidding.
Well, it worked out for me because Joe just ended up doing that work for me, which was great. Okay, cool. So
real quick,
October.
we do have a couple of commits on catalog D. That one that I remembered, I actually already bumped the operator registry thing, so I don't know which version of operator for catalog D you're using, Bryce, but that bug that we saw with your demo, like that might, we should confirm it and make an issue, but that might already be fixed on main, but not in a release. And then separately, Kevin had a PR that added printer columns, or one printer column to show the phase of the catalog, which would be nice so that you don't have to watch the entire YAML, so you can sort of see when it's unpacked. So it might be worth cutting another catalog D release to get that into operator controller if we think that there's enough value there, which there may be, especially if that bug is fixed.
That might be a patch release too, but yeah, we can take this offline and decide if it needs to be a 0.8 release or a 0.7.z release.
Sure.
But yeah.
With that in mind, so out of that conversation, can we add a ticket to the current operator controller milestone to bump catalog D, or to bump its catalog D dependency? Because we need to do that, right?
Currently it's up to date.
Oh, okay, never mind then. Okay, well, I think that's all the to do. So I'd like to start that discussion, and we'll consider this action item completed, and then I'll cut the operator controller release next week based on the outcome. Well, I'll do this no matter what. And I think that's everything we had on the agenda. So unless somebody has anything we want to add last minute, we can adjourn for the day. Any last minute entries? See the chat. Any comments? Oop. Okay. And on that note, then we will end the meeting. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for all your contributions, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.